The bullet wound in his shoulder was still bleeding when they brought him in. Evangeline Whitmore pressed her hands against the gurney as the paramedics rushed through the emergency doors of Sacred Heart Military Hospital. The man's eyes rolled back, showing only whites, and his lips moved in silent delirium. "What happened to him?" she asked, grabbing medical supplies from the cabinet. "Found him collapsed outside the bus station downtown. No ID, no wallet, nothing. Just this." The paramedic handed her a torn military dog tag. The name was scratched out, unreadable. Evangeline studied the unconscious man as they transferred him to the examination table. Dark hair matted with dried blood, a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, and calloused hands that spoke of violence. His breathing was shallow, erratic. "Get Dr. Morrison," she told the nurse, "and prep the surgical suite." But when she turned back, his eyes were open. Gray eyes, sharp despite the pain medication coursing through his system. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Don't trust anyone," he whispered. "They're coming for me." Before she could respond, his grip loosened, and he slipped back into unconsciousness. 2 hours later, after extracting the bullet and stitching the worst of his wounds, Evangeline found herself alone with him in the recovery ward. The hospital was quiet at this hour, most staff having gone home for the night. She checked his vitals, noting the steady improvement in his heart rate. "You're safe now," she said softly, though she wasn't sure why she spoke to an unconscious patient. His medical chart was sparse. John Doe, approximate age 32, multiple healed fractures consistent with combat injuries. But there was something else, something that made her pause. The scars on his torso weren't random. They formed patterns, deliberate marks that looked almost like, "You shouldn't be here alone." Evangeline spun around. A man in a cheap suit stood in the doorway, his badge hanging from his belt. FBI, though something about him seemed off. "I'm sorry, visiting hours are over," she said, stepping protectively in front of the patient's bed. "This man is wanted for questioning in connection with a terrorist attack. We need to take him into custody immediately. He's barely stable. Moving him now could kill him." The agent stepped closer. "That's not your concern, nurse." "Actually, it is. I'm his attending physician until Dr. Morrison returns in the morning." The lie came easily, surprising her. She'd never defied authority before, never questioned the rules that had governed her strictly religious upbringing. But something about this man's presence felt wrong. "I'll need to see proper paperwork," she continued. "Hospital policy." The agent's jaw tightened. "We don't need paperwork for national security matters." "You do in my hospital." For a moment, they stared at each other. Then the agent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Very well. We'll be back in the morning with the proper documentation." After he left, Evangeline locked the door and pulled the curtains around the patient's bed. Her hands shook as she checked his wounds again. The bullet she'd extracted was military grade, not something used in typical street crime. "What kind of trouble are you in?" she murmured. At 4 in the morning, when the hospital was at its quietest, she made a decision that would change everything. She filled a basin with warm water and gathered clean towels. His bandages needed changing, and the dried blood had to be cleaned from his skin. As she carefully removed the surgical tape, he stirred. His eyes opened, focusing on her face with startling clarity. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough but coherent. "Someone had to watch over you. There were men here earlier, claiming to be FBI." Something flickered across his features. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. They didn't have proper paperwork." He almost smiled at that. "Paperwork won't stop them." Evangeline wrung out the cloth and began cleaning the blood from his chest. Her touch was gentle, professional, but when her fingers brushed against one of the strange scars, he inhaled sharply. "These marks," she said, "they're not from combat, are they?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, they're a map." "A map to what?" "To the truth about why they want me dead." The water in the basin turned pink as she worked, washing away the evidence of violence. But with each gentle stroke of the cloth, she uncovered more scars, more secrets carved into his skin. "What's your real name?" she asked. "Phoenix," he said after a pause. "Phoenix Ravencroft." "And the men who were here?" "They weren't FBI." Evangeline's hand stilled against his shoulder. "Then who were they?" "The same people who put these bullets in me. The same ones who'll come back." She should have been afraid. Any rational person would have called security, would have stepped away from this dangerous stranger. Instead, She found herself leaning closer. Then we need to get you out of here. Phoenix studied her face in the dim light. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. She didn't have a good answer for that. All she knew was that when she looked at him, she saw someone who needed healing, someone who'd been fighting battles she couldn't imagine. Because, she said, dipping the cloth back into the water, sometimes helping a stranger is exactly what faith is supposed to look like. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over Millbrook Heights. But inside the quiet hospital room, as Evangeline continued her careful ministrations, neither of them knew that their lives had just become irrevocably intertwined. The war was coming to them, whether they were ready or not. Phoenix's memories came back in fragments over the next 2 days, each one more disturbing than the last. He remembered running through a warehouse in Detroit, automatic gunfire echoing behind him, blood on concrete floors, a briefcase full of documents that could bring down half the Pentagon. Then the explosion, the searing pain, and waking up 3 days later in an abandoned building with no idea how he'd gotten there. Your fever broke during the night, Evangeline said, checking his temperature. Dr. Thornfield wants to run some additional tests. The woman with the silver hair? She's been asking questions about you. Different questions than the FBI agents. Phoenix tensed. What kind of questions? Medical ones. About your scars, your injuries. She seems to know more about battlefield medicine than most doctors here. Before he could respond, the door opened and Dr. Helena Thornfield entered with a security guard Phoenix hadn't seen before. The man was older, maybe 50, with the bearing of someone who'd seen combat. Mr. Ravencroft, Dr. Thornfield said, using his real name. I think we need to talk. Evangeline stepped forward. I don't think my patient is ready for questioning. It's all right, Phoenix said, though every instinct told him to run. What do you want to know? Dr. Thornfield pulled up a chair while the security guard, whose nameplate read M. Vale, positioned himself by the door. I've been a trauma surgeon for 23 years, she began. 15 of those in military hospitals overseas. I've seen injuries from every weapon imaginable, but yours are unique. She opened his chart and pointed to a photograph of one of his scars. This wasn't made by shrapnel or a knife. It's too precise, too deliberate. Someone carved this into you while you were conscious. Phoenix's jaw tightened. Your point? My point is that I've only seen marks like this once before. On a soldier who came through my field hospital in Afghanistan. He claimed he was part of a classified operation, something called Operation Nightfall. The name hit Phoenix like a physical blow. Marcus Vale straightened, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. You know something about that operation? Dr. Thornfield continued. And based on the men who've been circling this hospital for the past 48 hours, I'd say someone wants to make sure you never talk about it. Evangeline looked between them. What's Operation Nightfall? Phoenix closed his eyes. The memories were clearer now, more focused. A team of 6 operatives infiltrating a arms-dealing network that reached into the highest levels of government. Intelligence that could expose senators, generals, defense contractors. And then the betrayal. It was supposed to be a simple extraction, he said finally. We had evidence of weapons being sold to terrorist organizations. American weapons, sold by American officials. What happened to your team? Dr. Thornfield asked gently. They're all dead. Except me. The room fell silent. Outside, Phoenix could hear the normal sounds of a functioning hospital, but they felt distant, unreal. The man who came here the first night, Evangeline said slowly. He wasn't really FBI. Colonel Sterling Blackwood, Phoenix confirmed. He was supposed to be our contact, our way out. Instead, he was the one selling the weapons. Marcus Vale spoke for the first time. Blackwood's been promoted since then. He's running security for the entire Northeastern Military District now. Phoenix studied the older man. How would you know that? Because I used to work for him. 20 years in the Army, last 5 as his personal security chief. Until I started asking too many questions about missing equipment reports. Dr. Thornfield leaned forward. Marcus came to me 6 months ago with concerns about irregularities in military supply chains. Weapons going missing, paperwork being altered. We've been trying to gather evidence. And now Phoenix shows up with proof carved into his skin, Marcus added. Evangeline sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. This is insane. You're talking about a conspiracy involving military officials, and you want to use my patient as evidence? I'm talking about preventing more American weapons from ending up in the hands of people who want to kill Americans. Dr. Thornfield replied. And your patient is the only person alive who can testify to what really happened. Phoenix struggled to sit up straighter. The movement sent pain shooting through his shoulder, but he needed to think clearly. There's more, he said. The documents we recovered before the team was killed. I hid them before Blackwood found me. Where? Marcus asked. That's the problem. I can't remember. The head trauma, the drugs they used on me. It's all fragmented. Dr. Thornfield made a note in his chart. Memory recovery is possible, but it takes time. Time you might not have. As if summoned by her words, the lights in the corridor outside flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. That's not a power outage, Marcus said, moving to the window. Someone cut the main lines. Phoenix was already trying to get out of bed, ignoring the pain. They're coming. We need to move now. Evangeline helped him stand, supporting his weight as he swayed. Where can we go? The service elevator, Dr. Thornfield said. It has independent power. Marcus knows the way. They could hear footsteps in the corridor now, moving with military precision. Phoenix counted at least 4 sets, possibly more. There's something else, he said as they moved toward the door. The scars aren't just evidence. They're coordinates. Marcus paused. Coordinates to what? To where I hid the documents. But I need time to decode them, and I need to stay alive long enough to do it. Dr. Thornfield opened the door carefully, checking the hallway. Then we better get moving, because staying here is definitely not going to keep you alive. As they slipped out of the room, Phoenix caught Evangeline's hand. Her faith had led her to help a stranger, but now that faith was about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. Behind them, the sound of boots on linoleum grew closer. The war Phoenix had been running from had finally caught up, and this time, he wasn't running alone. The service elevator descended in silence, broken only by Phoenix's labored breathing and the distant sound of boots searching the floors above. There's a supply tunnel that connects to the parking garage, Marcus whispered. We can get you out through there. Dr. Thornfield checked her watch. The shift change happens in 20 minutes. That'll give us maximum confusion to work with. Evangeline pressed a fresh bandage against Phoenix's shoulder where blood had started seeping through his hospital gown. You're pushing yourself too hard. These wounds aren't healed. Better wounded than dead, he replied, though his face was pale with exhaustion. The elevator stopped at the basement level. Marcus peered out, then motioned them forward into a maze of storage rooms and maintenance corridors. The smell of industrial cleaning supplies and medical waste filled the air. This way, Dr. Thornfield led them past stacks of medical equipment toward a service door marked Authorized Personnel Only. As they moved through the basement, Phoenix found himself studying the woman who'd become their unlikely leader. Her movements were too precise, too military for someone who'd spent her career in hospitals. You weren't just a trauma surgeon overseas, he said quietly. She glanced back at him. What makes you say that? The way you cleared that room upstairs. The way you're moving now. You've had combat training. Dr. Thornfield stopped at a junction between 2 corridors, listening for sounds of pursuit. I was military intelligence before I became a doctor, specialized in extracting information from captured enemy operatives. And you just happened to end up working at the same hospital where I was brought? There are no coincidences in this business, Mr. Ravencroft. I've been tracking Blackwood's activities for 3 years. When Marcus came to me with his concerns, I knew we needed to find one of the survivors from your operation. Marcus opened the service door, revealing a narrow tunnel that stretched toward the parking garage. We monitored emergency services. When reports came in about a John Doe with military-grade bullet wounds, we knew it might be our break. Evangeline stopped walking. You're saying you've been watching him this whole time? Not watching, Dr. Thornfield corrected. Protecting. Those men who came to the hospital the first night, they weren't the first team Blackwood sent. We intercepted 2 other attempts to locate Phoenix before he regained consciousness. They emerged into the parking garage where a nondescript gray sedan waited. As Marcus started the engine, Phoenix turned to Evangeline. You need to understand what you're getting into. These people won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way. I understand. Her voice was steadier than he'd expected. But I also understand that sometimes you have to choose between what's safe and what's right. Dr. Thornfield pulled out a tablet and showed them satellite images of a military installation. This is Ravens Hollow Base, about 40 miles north of here. It's where Blackwood has been operating his weapons trafficking network. How do you know? Because Marcus managed to plant surveillance equipment before his discharge. We've been documenting unauthorized weapons transfers for months. Marcus turned onto the main road, checking his mirrors constantly. The problem is that our evidence is circumstantial. We need the documents Phoenix hid to make charges stick. Phoenix studied the scars on his forearm, tracing the precise lines with his finger. These coordinates lead to a storage facility in Baltimore, Industrial District, near the harbor. That's a 3-hour drive, Dr. Thornfield said. But we won't make it if Blackwood's people are monitoring the highways. There's another problem, Phoenix added grimly. The storage facility is in the middle of enemy territory. Blackwood owns half the businesses in that district. Evangeline leaned forward from the back seat. Then we need a distraction. Something big enough to draw his attention away from the facility. Marcus smiled for the first time since they'd met. I like the way you think. What did you have in mind? The hospital has a computer system that connects to military databases. If someone were to access classified files from Blackwood's own terminal, wouldn't that trigger an investigation? Dr. Thornfield raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we hack into military networks? I'm suggesting we use Blackwood's paranoia against him. If he thinks someone is trying to expose him from inside his own operation, he'll focus all his resources on finding the leak. Phoenix studied Evangeline with new respect. Her innocent appearance masked a sharp strategic mind. It could work, he said, but someone would have to physically access his office to make it look authentic. Leave that to me, Dr. Thornfield said. I still have contacts in military intelligence. People who've been waiting for a chance to bring Blackwood down. They drove in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Phoenix found himself watching Evangeline in the rearview mirror. She'd traded her nurse's uniform for civilian clothes that Marcus had provided, but she still looked out of place in this world of conspiracies and violence. Why are you really helping me? He asked. She met his eyes in the mirror. Because when I look at you, I see someone who's been fighting a war that nobody else knows about. Someone who's lost everything trying to do the right thing. And that's enough for you? To risk your life for a stranger? My whole life has been about following rules, staying safe, never questioning authority. But watching you fight to expose the truth, even when it might cost you everything. She paused. Maybe it's time I stopped hiding behind my faith and started living it. Marcus turned off the highway onto a back road that would take them toward Baltimore. We'll reach the storage facility in 2 hours. Dr. Thornfield, how long do you need to set up the distraction? Give me 90 minutes. I'll coordinate with my contacts to make sure Blackwood is fully occupied when you reach the facility. Phoenix closed his eyes, trying to push past the pain and exhaustion to remember more details about what he'd hidden. The documents contained more than just evidence of weapons trafficking. They revealed a network of corruption that reached into Congress, the Pentagon, even the State Department. There's something else you need to know, he said quietly. The documents I had don't just implicate Blackwood. They expose dozens of officials, people with the power to make all of us disappear permanently. Dr. Thornfield nodded grimly. Then we better make sure we get them before Blackwood figures out where they are. As the car sped through the Maryland countryside, Phoenix realized that their small group was about to take on enemies with resources they could barely imagine. But for the first time since his team had been killed, he wasn't facing the fight alone. The question was whether any of them would survive long enough to see justice done. The storage facility in Baltimore's Industrial District looked abandoned, but Phoenix knew better. The rust on the metal siding was too uniform, the overgrown weeds too strategically placed. Someone had gone to great lengths to make the building appear forgotten. Security cameras, Marcus noted, pointing to nearly invisible devices mounted on telephone poles. Military-grade. Motion sensors, too, if I had to guess. Dr. Thornfield's voice crackled through their earpieces. Distraction is in place. Blackwood just received word that someone accessed his personal files from inside Raven's Hollow base. He's mobilizing his entire security team. Phoenix studied the building through binoculars. Unit 47B should be on the second floor, northeast corner. But getting there means crossing 50 yards of open ground. Not necessarily, Evangeline said, studying the warehouse next door. That loading dock connects to this building. If we can get inside the adjacent structure, we might be able to access the storage unit from above. Marcus smiled. Former nurse turned tactical planner. I'm impressed. They made their way around to the back of the neighboring warehouse. Marcus picked the lock with practiced efficiency while Phoenix kept watch. The building was empty except for scattered debris and the musty smell of disuse. There, Evangeline pointed to a section of the ceiling where the drywall had been removed, revealing access to the ventilation system. That ductwork runs between both buildings. Phoenix shook his head. I can't make that climb with this shoulder. Then I'll go. Absolutely not. These people are killers. Evangeline was already pulling off her jacket. The duct is too narrow for you, or Marcus anyway. And if something goes wrong, you're the only one who knows exactly what we're looking for. Before Phoenix could protest further, she had climbed onto a stack of crates and pulled herself into the ventilation shaft. Her voice echoed back to them through the metal ductwork. I can see the storage unit. There's a keypad lock, but the access panel is loose. Phoenix guided her through the combination he remembered, his heart pounding as he listened to her movements above. Every sound seemed amplified in the empty warehouse. Got it, she whispered. I'm seeing file boxes, computer equipment, and… Phoenix, there's something else here. Something that looks like explosives. Marcus and Phoenix exchanged glances. Describe them, Phoenix said urgently. Military packaging, timer devices. They're set for 48 hours from now. Phoenix's blood went cold. That's when the Senate subcommittee is scheduled to vote on the new defense spending bill. Blackwood's planning to eliminate the entire oversight committee. Get out of there now, Marcus commanded. But as Evangeline began gathering the crucial documents, they heard vehicles pulling up outside. Multiple engines, doors slamming, the coordinated movement of a tactical team. We've got company, Phoenix said, moving to a window. 6 men, full combat gear. They found us. Evangeline's voice came through the earpiece, strained but determined. I've got the files, but the explosives are connected to a motion sensor. If I move them wrong, they'll detonate immediately. Leave them, Phoenix said. Just get out. People are going to die if these bombs go off. Marcus was already moving toward the back exit. We need to leave now. They're surrounding the building. But Phoenix couldn't abandon Evangeline. Despite knowing her for only days, the thought of losing her felt like losing part of himself. He started toward the ceiling access. What are you doing? Marcus demanded. Going after her. You'll never make that climb with your injuries. Phoenix ignored him, pulling himself up onto the crates despite the searing pain in his shoulder. As he reached for the ventilation opening, gunfire erupted outside. The tactical team was moving in. Above him, he could hear Evangeline working frantically with the explosives. The timer mechanism is more complex than I thought. I need another few minutes. We don't have minutes. The front door exploded inward as the tactical team breached the building. Phoenix hauled himself into the ductwork, his shoulders screaming in protest. Blood seeped through his bandages as he crawled toward Evangeline's position. He found her in the storage unit, surrounded by scattered documents and bent over a device that looked like something from a nightmare. Wires, digital timers, enough explosive material to level half the block. Can you disarm it? He asked. I think so. My father taught me about electronics before he… She paused. Before he abandoned us. Phoenix gathered the scattered files while she worked. The documents were even more damaging than he'd remembered. Bank records, communications between officials, photographs of weapons transfers. Evidence that would destroy dozens of careers and possibly prevent a war. Done, Evangeline said, carefully disconnecting the final wire. But we still need to get out of here. Below them, they could hear the tactical team searching the warehouse methodically. Boots on concrete, sharp commands, the sound of equipment being moved. The roof access, Phoenix pointed to a ladder in the corner of the storage unit. We can get to the next building from there. They climbed carefully, Phoenix fighting waves of dizziness from blood loss. As they emerged onto the roof, they could see the full scope of the operation below. Military vehicles, snipers positioned on surrounding buildings, a coordination that spoke of significant resources. This isn't just about recovering documents, Evangeline realized. They're planning to eliminate all the witnesses. Phoenix nodded grimly. Blackwood can't afford to leave anyone alive who knows about the conspiracy. They made their way across the rooftops, jumping narrow gaps between buildings. Phoenix's strength was fading, but Evangeline stayed close, supporting him when he stumbled. There, she pointed to a fire escape on a building 2 blocks away. Marcus should be waiting with the car. As they climbed down the fire escape, Phoenix's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Thornfield. The text was brief but chilling. Blackwood knows about Evangeline. He's coming for her specifically. Phoenix showed her the message. We need to get you somewhere safe. I'm not leaving you. This isn't about choice anymore. If Blackwood knows who you are, then he knows about your past. He'll use that against you. Evangeline stopped walking. What do you mean, my past? Phoenix realized she didn't know. In all the chaos and danger, no one had told her the most crucial piece of information. The reason Blackwood wanted her alive instead of simply eliminating another witness. Evangeline, he said gently, there's something about your family that you need to know. Something about why your father really left. In the distance, they could hear the tactical team expanding their search. Time was running out, and the truth Phoenix was about to reveal would change everything between them. The documents in his hands contained evidence of corruption, but they also contained records that would shatter Evangeline's understanding of her own identity. Marcus was waiting with the engine running when they reached the rendezvous point, but Phoenix could see the tension in his face before they even got in the car. We need to move fast, Marcus said as they drove away from the industrial district. Dr. Thornfield intercepted communications. Blackwood's calling in favors from every agency he's got connections with. Evangeline sat in the back seat, still processing what Phoenix had started to tell her. What did you mean about my father? Phoenix exchanged a look with Marcus in the rearview mirror. There was no easy way to deliver this kind of news. The documents I recovered contain personnel files going back 15 years, he said carefully. Your father didn't abandon your family. He was recruited. Recruited by who? By Blackwood. Your father was a communications specialist, worked on encrypted military networks. Blackwood needed someone on the inside who could alter records without leaving traces. Evangeline's face went pale. That's impossible. My father was a good man. I'm sure he was. But good people sometimes make bad choices when they're threatened. Phoenix pulled out one of the recovered files and handed it to her. The photograph showed a man in military uniform, younger than she would remember him, but unmistakably her father. Lieutenant Colonel James Whitmore, she read aloud. Special Operations Communications Division. Marcus turned onto a back road leading toward the mountains. According to these records, your father discovered the weapons trafficking operation by accident. Instead of eliminating him, Blackwood offered him a choice. What kind of choice? Phoenix's voice was gentle but firm. Cooperate with the cover-up or watch his family disappear. The file contained transcripts of recorded conversations, bank records showing payments made to accounts in her father's name, and surveillance photographs of Evangeline and her mother taken without their knowledge. He was protecting us, she whispered, for 3 years. But eventually, he couldn't live with what he was doing. The last entry in his file shows him requesting a meeting with military investigators. Evangeline's hands shook as she turned the pages. The car accident. The night he died. Wasn't an accident. The weight of 15 years of believing her father had abandoned them crashed down on her. All the anger, the feeling of rejection, the struggle to understand why a loving father would simply disappear. None of it had been real. Blackwood killed him, and then staged it to look like your father was running away from his responsibilities. Made sure you and your mother would hate his memory instead of investigating his death. Dr. Thornfield's voice came through their earpieces. I'm tracking multiple aircraft converging on your position. Military helicopters, moving fast. Marcus pressed harder on the accelerator. How long until they reach us? 15 minutes, maybe less. They were climbing into the Pine Ridge Mountains now, the road becoming narrower and more winding. Phoenix knew this terrain would work against them if they had to run on foot, especially with his injuries. There's an abandoned ranger station about 10 miles ahead, Marcus said. We can hold up there, try to contact federal authorities. No. Evangeline's voice was different now, harder. We're not running anymore. Phoenix turned to look at her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Sterling Blackwood destroyed my family, killed my father, and spent 15 years letting me believe I wasn't good enough to keep a parent's love. Her eyes met his, and he saw something new there. Not just courage, but cold determination. I want him to pay for that. Evangeline, this isn't about revenge, isn't it? You've been running from this man for months. Dr. Thornfield and Marcus have been gathering evidence for years, and none of it has stopped him. She leaned forward, addressing Marcus. What would happen if Blackwood thought I was trying to follow in my father's footsteps? If he believed I had evidence that could expose him? Marcus understood immediately. He'd want to capture you alive. Use you to find out what you know. Exactly. He'd take risks, make mistakes. Phoenix grabbed her hand. You're talking about making yourself bait. That's insane. Is it? Or is it the only way to get close enough to him to end this? Dr. Thornfield's voice crackled through the earpiece again. Aircraft are splitting up. 2 heading your direction, 1 circling back toward the city. They're trying to cut off your escape routes. Phoenix studied the files spread across the back seat. Among the evidence of Blackwood's crimes were detailed schematics of Ravens Hollow Base, including security protocols and personnel schedules. If we're going to do this, he said slowly, we need to do it right. No improvisation, no heroics. We planned every detail. Evangeline nodded. What do you need me to do? First, we need to get word to Blackwood that you're alive and that you have your father's files. Files he thought were destroyed 15 years ago. Marcus pulled into a dirt road that led to an old logging camp. I can arrange that. Send a message through channels we know he monitors. Then we need a location for the meeting. Somewhere public enough that he can't simply eliminate us, but private enough that he'll feel secure making the exchange. Dr. Thornfield had been listening to their conversation. The Senate hearing on the defense budget is tomorrow. If Blackwood is planning to use those explosives to eliminate the Oversight Committee, he'll be focused on the Capitol building. Phoenix felt the pieces clicking together. We arranged the meeting at the Capitol. Force him to choose between his assassination plot and recovering the evidence that could destroy him. And if he chooses both, then we make sure the choice destroys him either way. As they planned their desperate gambit, Phoenix realized that Evangeline had changed fundamentally in the past few hours. The innocent young woman who had given him a bath in the hospital had evolved into someone willing to risk everything for justice. But he also realized something else, something that terrified him more than facing Blackwood's military resources. He was falling in love with her. And tomorrow, their plan would require him to watch her walk into mortal danger, knowing that one mistake would cost them both everything they'd fought to protect. The message was delivered at dawn through encrypted military channels that Blackwood monitored religiously. Evangeline Whitmore was alive. She had her father's hidden files, and she wanted to make a deal. He's responding faster than we expected, Dr. Thornfield reported from her position inside a federal building across from the Capitol. Blackwood's mobilizing resources, but he's also pulling security from Ravens Hollow Base. Phoenix adjusted his earpiece as he watched Evangeline prepare for what might be their final conversation. They were hidden in a safe house Marcus had arranged, an apartment overlooking the Potomac River where they could see anyone approaching from multiple directions. You don't have to do this, Phoenix said for the 3rd time in an hour. We can find another way. Evangeline finished checking the recording equipment hidden in her jacket. My father spent 3 years living in fear because he was afraid to stand up to Blackwood. I won't make the same mistake. The plan was elaborate, but necessary. Evangeline would meet Blackwood at the Lincoln Memorial at noon, offering to trade her father's files for safe passage out of the country. Meanwhile, Phoenix and Marcus would infiltrate the Capitol building to locate and disarm the explosives scheduled to detonate during the afternoon Senate hearing. Dr. Thornfield had used her military intelligence contacts to arrange for FBI surveillance teams to be in position, but everyone knew that Blackwood's influence ran deep enough to compromise even federal agencies. They were walking into a situation where allies and enemies might be indistinguishable. Blackwood's agreed to the meeting, Marcus announced, monitoring communications intercepts. But he's bringing a full security detail. Military contractors, not regular personnel. Phoenix studied satellite images of the memorial area on his laptop. 12 men, positioned to control all access points. He's not planning to negotiate. Which is exactly what we expected, Evangeline replied. The question is whether he'll bring the detonation codes for the explosives. If he's smart, those codes are stored electronically at Ravens Hollow Base, which means someone needs to be there to transmit a cancellation signal. Dr. Thornfield's voice crackled through their earpieces. I've identified the transmission equipment at the base. It's in Blackwood's personal office, but the security is formidable. How formidable? Biometric locks, armed guards, and a vault that would take explosives to breach. Phoenix felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on them. Save the Senate committee or capture Blackwood. Protect Evangeline or prevent a terrorist attack. Every option required sacrificing something precious. There's another way, Evangeline said quietly. What if we don't try to do both operations simultaneously? What do you mean? I mean, what if the meeting with Blackwood isn't about making a deal? What if it's about getting him to reveal information we need? Phoenix looked at her sharply. You're thinking about torture. Evangeline, that's not who you are. No, I'm thinking about justice. And sometimes justice requires uncomfortable choices. She pulled out a small device that looked like a hearing aid. Dr. Thornfield, this neural stimulation device you gave me. It's not just for recording conversations, is it? Dr. Thornfield was quiet for a long moment. It can be used to induce severe discomfort, yes. But using it would be crossing a line. Blackwood crossed that line 15 years ago when he killed my father. Phoenix grabbed her hands. Listen to me. If you use that device, if you torture him for information, you become something different. Something harder. And I don't want to lose who you are. Evangeline looked into his eyes, and he saw the struggle there. The woman she had been, raised in faith and compassion, warring with the woman she was becoming in response to injustice and loss. What if who I was isn't strong enough to protect the people I care about? Then we find a way to be strong together. Marcus interrupted their moment. Decision time. Blackwood's convoy is moving toward the memorial. If we're going to do this, we need to be in position in 30 minutes. Phoenix made a choice that surprised everyone, including himself. Change of plans. I'm going to the memorial with Evangeline. That's suicide, Dr. Thornfield protested. Blackwood's orders are to capture her and kill you on sight. Maybe, but if I can get close enough to him, I can access his personal communication device. Download the cancellation codes directly. And if he kills you first? Phoenix looked at Evangeline. Then at least I die protecting someone worth protecting. The Lincoln Memorial at midday was crowded with tourists, but Phoenix could easily identify Blackwood's security team. They had positioned themselves to blend with the crowd while maintaining clear sight lines and escape routes. Evangeline walked alone toward the steps of the memorial, carrying a briefcase that contained carefully selected documents from her father's files. Enough real evidence to convince Blackwood she had everything, but not enough to compromise their larger investigation if things went wrong. Phoenix moved through the crowd from the opposite direction, using his military training to identify and avoid the security team's positioning. His shoulder throbbed with each step, but adrenaline kept him focused. Blackwood himself stood at the base of Lincoln's statue, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. When he saw Evangeline approaching, his expression showed both satisfaction and something else. Recognition. You look like your father, Blackwood said as she reached him. Same stubborn expression he had when he thought he could defy me. My father was a better man than you'll ever be. Your father was a coward who chose money over principles, just like you're about to do. Evangeline opened the briefcase, revealing documents that made Blackwood's eyes widen. These files contain evidence of every illegal transaction you've made in the past 15 years. Bank accounts, weapons transfers, assassination orders, including the order to kill your father when he became inconvenient. Phoenix was close enough now to hear their conversation through his earpiece. He also could see something that chilled him. Blackwood wasn't wearing a communication device. The detonation codes weren't here. But then Evangeline did something unexpected. Instead of offering to trade the files, she smiled. Did you really think I came here to make a deal with you? She asked. Blackwood's expression changed as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that while you've been focused on me, federal agents have been systematically dismantling your entire operation. Your base at Ravens Hollow, your network of contractors, your bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. That's impossible, is it? Dr. Helena Thornfield sends her regards, by the way. Along with Agent Sarah Martinez from the FBI, Agent David Chun from Military Intelligence, and about 30 other people you thought you'd bought or intimidated into silence. Phoenix realized what had happened. The entire plan had been a deception within a deception. While they'd been planning to infiltrate and fight, Dr. Thornfield had been coordinating with federal authorities to launch simultaneous raids on all of Blackwood's operations. Blackwood reached for his weapon, but Phoenix was already moving. He tackled the older man to the ground as Evangeline dove for cover behind one of the memorial's pillars. Around them, chaos erupted as Blackwood's security team found themselves facing not only FBI agents but also military police who had been positioned throughout the crowd. Phoenix and Blackwood struggled on the marble steps. both men fighting with the desperation of those who knew the stakes. But Phoenix's injuries had weakened him, and Blackwood was stronger than his age suggested. "You should have stayed dead," Blackwood snarled, pressing his advantage. "Probably," Phoenix agreed, and then drove his knee into Blackwood's solar plexus with enough force to double him over. The fight was over quickly after that. FBI agents swarmed the memorial steps, taking Blackwood and his surviving security team into custody. Phoenix found himself sitting on the steps, bleeding from reopened wounds but alive. Evangeline knelt beside him, pressing her hands against his shoulder where blood was seeping through his shirt. "It's over," she said softly. "Is it? There'll be trials, investigations, people looking for revenge. Maybe, but we'll face whatever comes next together." Phoenix looked up at Lincoln's statue, thinking about the weight of leadership and the cost of doing what's right. Then he looked at Evangeline, whose courage and determination had made their victory possible. Together, he agreed, and for the first time in months, he believed they might actually have a future worth fighting for. The victory at the Lincoln Memorial lasted exactly 18 hours. Phoenix woke in the FBI safe house to the sound of Marcus shouting into his phone and Dr. Thornfield rapidly packing equipment. Evangeline sat by the window, her face pale as she watched news reports on her laptop. "What's happening?" Phoenix asked, struggling to sit up despite the fresh bandages covering his shoulder. "Blackwood's dead," Marcus said grimly. "Killed in federal custody before he could reveal the full extent of his network." Phoenix felt his blood turn cold. "How? Officially? Heart attack. Unofficially, someone with serious resources wanted him silenced permanently." Dr. Thornfield looked up from her equipment. "It gets worse. The explosive devices we thought were neutralized? They were decoys. The real bombs are already in place at the Capitol building, and the detonation sequence has been activated." Evangeline turned from the window. The Senate hearing was moved to this afternoon. Emergency session to address the defense budget crisis. 300 people will be in that building. Phoenix forced himself to stand, ignoring the waves of dizziness. "How long do we have?" 4 hours, maybe less. The devices are military grade, designed to collapse the entire east wing of the building. "Can't the FBI evacuate?" Marcus shook his head. "They tried. Someone high up in the chain of command countermanded the evacuation order, classified it as a terrorist hoax designed to disrupt government operations." "Blackwood's network runs deeper than we thought," Dr. Thornfield said. "He was never the head of this conspiracy. He was middle management." Phoenix studied the building schematics Dr. Thornfield had spread across the table. The Capitol's security system was formidable, designed to prevent exactly the kind of infiltration they needed to accomplish. "The bombs have to be connected to a central detonation system," he said. "Something with enough range to trigger all devices simultaneously." The building's own communication system, Evangeline realized. They're using the Capitol's emergency broadcast network to carry the detonation signal, which means the control point has to be inside the building itself, probably in the secure communications center in the basement. Dr. Thornfield pulled up security footage on her tablet. "The problem is getting there. The communications center requires biometric identification from 3 different department heads simultaneously." Phoenix studied the footage, noting the guard rotations and access protocols. Unless someone creates enough chaos to force an emergency evacuation, then all those security protocols go out the window. "What kind of chaos?" Marcus asked. Evangeline was already moving toward the equipment Dr. Thornfield had packed. "The kind that makes them think the building is under attack from multiple directions." She pulled out several devices that looked like military communication equipment. "These signal jammers can disrupt security systems, but they also broadcast on frequencies that military scanners identify as hostile." "You're talking about triggering a lockdown alert," Phoenix said. "That'll bring every federal agency in the city down on the building." "Exactly. While they're dealing with the apparent external threat, we slip in through the confusion and get to the communications center." Dr. Thornfield shook her head. "It's too dangerous. If those bombs detonate while you're in the building, then we make sure they don't detonate," Phoenix replied. "But we need someone on the outside coordinating the distraction." Marcus checked his watch. "I can handle the external diversions. Create enough noise to keep their attention focused away from the basement. And I'll monitor federal communications," Dr. Thornfield added. Try to identify who's blocking the evacuation orders. Phoenix turned to Evangeline. You don't have to do this. The basement infiltration is a 2-person maximum operation, and honestly, I'd rather do it alone. We've been through this argument before. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. This isn't about courage anymore. It's about survival odds, and they're not good. Evangeline stepped closer to him. Phoenix, in the past week, I've discovered that my father was murdered, that I've been living a lie for 15 years, and that the man I'm falling in love with is willing to die to protect people he's never met. I'm not walking away from any of that. The words hung in the air between them. Despite everything they'd been through, neither of them had spoken directly about the feelings growing between them. You're falling in love with me? Phoenix asked quietly. Terrible timing, I know. The worst possible timing. He reached for her hand. Which is why we're going to survive this. Because now I have something worth staying alive for. Marcus cleared his throat. While this is touching, we have 3 hours to prevent a terrorist attack. They spent the next hour planning every detail of their infiltration. The Capitol building's layout was complex, but Phoenix's military experience and Evangeline's growing tactical instincts helped them identify potential routes and backup plans. The key is speed, Dr. Thornfield explained as she showed them the bomb locations on the building schematics. Once you access the communications center, you'll have maybe 10 minutes before security realizes what's happening. What about the detonation codes? Evangeline asked. That's the problem. The codes are biometric locked, tied to whoever's running this operation. We need to identify and capture the person with authorization. Phoenix studied surveillance footage from inside the Capitol. There, Senator Patricia Hawthorne, chair of the Defense Appropriations Committee. She's been in the building all morning, but she's not attending the hearing. She's positioned herself to have an alibi when the bombs go off, Marcus realized. And she'll have the codes to abort the sequence if something goes wrong with the plan. Dr. Thornfield pulled up Senator Hawthorne's biographical information. 20-year veteran of the Armed Services Committee, close personal friend of Colonel Blackwood, and she's scheduled to be in her private office during the hearing. Her office is 2 floors above the communications center, Phoenix noted. If we can get to her first, force her to provide the abort codes. She'll never cooperate willingly, Evangeline said. And we can't torture a sitting U.S. senator. No, but we can present her with a choice. Abort the bombing or watch her entire conspiracy collapse in real time. Marcus gathered his equipment. I'll start the external distractions in 90 minutes. That should give you enough time to get into position. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Phoenix pulled Evangeline aside. There's something I need you to know, he said. In case things go badly. Don't. We're both going to make it through this. Maybe. But if we don't, I want you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. Before the hospital, I was just surviving, just fighting to stay alive long enough to expose the truth. But you gave me something to live for. Evangeline kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and full of everything they might not get the chance to say later. Then let's make sure we both survive to figure out what comes next, she said. 30 minutes later, they were moving through the underground tunnels that connected federal buildings in downtown Washington. The Capitol building loomed above them, filled with people who had no idea they were sitting on top of enough explosives to level a city block. Phoenix checked his watch. 2 hours until the Senate hearing began. 2 hours to prevent a catastrophe that would reshape American politics and potentially start a war. But as they approached the Capitol's basement access, Phoenix realized that their greatest challenge wasn't the technical aspects of disarming bombs or infiltrating secure facilities. Their greatest challenge was that someone powerful enough to orchestrate Blackwood's death was still out there, still pulling strings, still determined to see this attack succeed. And that person was about to discover that Phoenix Ravencroft and Evangeline Whitmore were much harder to kill than they appeared. The basement tunnels beneath the Capitol building were a maze of service corridors and forgotten storage rooms that most people never knew existed. Phoenix and Evangeline moved through them with practiced stealth, their footsteps muffled by years of accumulated dust and the distant rumble of activity in the building above. Security checkpoint ahead, Evangeline whispered, studying the layout on her tablet. 2 guards, biometric scanner, and motion sensors. Phoenix examined the checkpoint through night vision scope. Dr. Thornfield's signal jammers should disrupt the electronic systems, but we still need to deal with the guards. Above them, They could hear the sound of Marcus's diversionary tactics beginning. False alarms triggered throughout the Capitol complex, drawing security personnel away from their normal posts as they responded to reports of suspicious activity on multiple fronts. There, Evangeline pointed to a ventilation grate. Service duct runs directly past the communications center. They moved through the narrow ductwork, Phoenix fighting waves of pain from his shoulder injury. The space was cramped and filled with the mechanical noise of the building's air circulation system. When they reached the communications center, Phoenix could see through the grate that the room was occupied by a single technician monitoring multiple computer screens. Banks of servers lined the walls, and in the center of the room sat a control console that looked like something from a military command center. "That's it," Phoenix whispered. "The central communication hub. If the detonation signal is going to come from anywhere, it's from that console." Evangeline studied the technician through the grate. He's not military. Contractor, probably. Which means he might not be willing to die for whatever cause he's supporting. They dropped silently into the room, Phoenix covering the technician while Evangeline moved to the control console. The man looked up from his screens with more surprise than fear. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, reaching for what looked like an alarm button. "Don't," Phoenix warned, his weapon trained on the man's center mass. "We're trying to prevent people from dying, not cause more deaths." The technician hesitated, his hand hovering over the alarm. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. Enlighten us," Evangeline said, her fingers flying over the computer keyboard as she accessed the communication system's programming. "The defense spending bill that's being voted on today will cut funding for essential military programs. Programs that protect American soldiers overseas." Phoenix almost laughed. "So you decided to blow up the Senate to prevent budget cuts? Sometimes extreme measures are necessary to protect national security." "Whose national security?" Evangeline asked, looking up from the computer. "Because I'm seeing communication logs here that suggest this attack is designed to benefit private military contractors, not soldiers." She turned the monitor toward the technician, showing him encrypted messages between Senator Hawthorne and executives from defense corporations. Plans to use the bombing as justification for increased military spending, with specific contracts already negotiated for companies owned by Hawthorne's family. "This isn't about protecting soldiers," Phoenix said. "It's about making money from their deaths." The technician stared at the evidence, his face pale. "They told me it was about preventing defense cuts that would cost American lives. They lied to you, just like they lied to Colonel Blackwood, just like they've been lying to everyone else involved in this conspiracy." Evangeline found the detonation sequence in the computer system. "Phoenix, I need you to see this. The bombs aren't just set to go off during the Senate hearing. They're programmed for a cascading sequence that will make it look like a sustained terrorist attack. Multiple explosions over several hours," Phoenix realized. "Maximum psychological impact, maximum justification for emergency military spending." The technician stood slowly, his hands visible. "What do you need me to do?" "Help us shut it down," Evangeline said. "All of it. The detonation sequence, the false flag operation, everything." But as the technician moved toward the console, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Not the building's normal fire or security alarms, but military-grade alert signals that meant only one thing. "Someone knows we're here," Phoenix said. Dr. Thornfield's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Armed security team heading for your location. Professional soldiers, not Capitol Police. You've got maybe 3 minutes." Evangeline worked frantically at the computer while Phoenix and the technician barricaded the door. The detonation sequence was protected by multiple layers of encryption, each one requiring biometric verification from authorized personnel. "I can't break through the security without Senator Hawthorne's authorization codes," Evangeline said. "Then we go get them," Phoenix replied. "The security team will be here any second. Not if we give them something else to worry about." Phoenix turned to the technician. "Is there a way to trigger a building-wide evacuation from this console?" "Yes, but it requires override codes that only senior staff have." "What about a fire suppression system? Something that would force people to leave the building?" The technician's eyes widened with understanding. "I can activate the halon gas system in the Senate chamber. It'll force an immediate evacuation of that section of the building." "Do it." As gas began flooding the upper floors of the Capitol, Phoenix and Evangeline heard the security team reaching their corridor. But instead of trying to breach the communications center, the team was being redirected to help with the evacuation. Dr. Thornfield, we need a route to Senator Hawthorne's office, Phoenix said. Service elevator at the end of your corridor. But Phoenix, there's something else. Federal agents are arriving at the building in force. Real agents, not Hawthorne's people. Someone in the FBI finally figured out what's happening. Phoenix and Evangeline reached Senator Hawthorne's office to find the door already open and the room apparently empty. But as they stepped inside, they realized they'd walked into a trap. I was wondering when you'd get here, Senator Hawthorne said, emerging from behind her desk with a pistol in her hand. Though I have to admit, you've caused more disruption than I anticipated. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to wielding power. Her office was decorated with military commendations and photographs of her with various defense officials. Senator Hawthorne, Evangeline said calmly, we know about the bombing plot. We know about your financial connections to the defense contractors who'll benefit from increased military spending. Of course you do. That was always the risk of using people like Blackwood and his mercenaries. They leave evidence. Phoenix kept his weapon trained on her, though he knew she was positioned where he couldn't shoot without risking Evangeline. It's over. The FBI knows. The building is being evacuated, and your detonation sequence has been compromised. Has it? Hawthorne smiled coldly. Because I'm looking at a monitor that shows the primary explosive devices are still armed and ready to detonate. She gestured to a screen on her desk that displayed the bomb status. Phoenix realized that the communications center they'd accessed controlled only part of the detonation network. The real control system is hardwired into this office, Hawthorne continued, and it's programmed to activate automatically if I don't enter an abort code every 30 minutes. Then enter the abort code, Evangeline said. Why would I do that? This operation represents years of planning, millions of dollars in investment, and the future of American defense policy. It represents the murder of innocent people. It represents the sacrifice necessary to maintain America's military superiority in an increasingly dangerous world. Phoenix could see that Hawthorne genuinely believed her own justifications. She wasn't motivated by simple greed, but by a twisted patriotism that made her even more dangerous. How many people have to die for your vision of national security? Evangeline asked. As many as necessary. But as Hawthorne spoke, Phoenix noticed something she apparently hadn't. The timer on her desk screen was counting down faster than it should be. Someone had accelerated the detonation sequence. Senator, he said urgently, look at your timer. Hawthorne glanced at the screen and her face went white. That's impossible. The sequence isn't supposed to activate for another hour. Unless someone else has been playing the same game you have, Evangeline realized. Someone who decided you'd become a liability. The timer showed less than 10 minutes until detonation. Even if Hawthorne entered the abort codes now, they might not be able to stop the sequence in time. Help us stop this, Phoenix said. If those bombs go off, everyone in this building dies, including you. For a moment, Hawthorne hesitated. Then she moved toward the control console, her hands shaking as she began entering abort codes. It's not working, she said frantically. Someone's locked me out of the system. Evangeline pushed past her to the computer. Phoenix, I need you to get to the communications center. If I can coordinate between both systems simultaneously, we might be able to override the lockout. I'm not leaving you alone with her. You have to. It's the only way. Phoenix looked into Evangeline's eyes and saw the same determination that had made her stand up to Blackwood's agents in the hospital days ago. She'd evolved from a sheltered young woman into someone willing to risk everything for what she believed in. Be careful, he said, and then he was running through corridors filled with evacuation chaos, fighting his way back to the basement communications center. When he reached the center, he found the technicians still working frantically at the computers. I've been trying to break the lockout, the man said, but whoever programmed this system knew what they were doing. Phoenix activated his earpiece. Evangeline, I'm in position. Good. On my mark, we're going to attempt a synchronized override. If this works, all the explosive devices should disarm simultaneously. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have about 30 seconds to make peace with whatever higher power we believe in. Phoenix looked at the timer on his screen. 3 minutes until detonation. Evangeline, he said softly, whatever happens, I need you to know that falling in love with you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Phoenix Ravencroft, don't you dare say goodbye to me. We're going to stop these bombs. We're going to expose this conspiracy, and then we're going to figure out what comes next. Together. Together, he agreed. Execute override in 3, 2, 1. Now. Both Phoenix and Evangeline entered command simultaneously, their fingers flying over keyboards as they fought against security systems designed to prevent exactly what they were attempting. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, one by one, indicators on both screens began changing from red to green as explosive devices throughout the building powered down. We did it. Evangeline's voice came through the earpiece, filled with relief and exhaustion. But as Phoenix started to respond, he heard gunfire from the upper floors. Senator Hawthorne's voice came through his earpiece, desperate and afraid. They're here. The people who locked me out of the system. They're cleaning up loose ends. Phoenix was already moving, taking the stairs 3 at a time despite his injuries. When he reached Hawthorne's office, he found Evangeline standing over the senator's body, her hands pressed against a gunshot wound in Hawthorne's chest. She was trying to tell me something, Evangeline said, about who was really running the operation. Hawthorne's eyes focused on Phoenix with effort. Consortium, she whispered. Defense contractors, foreign investors, people who profit from American military conflicts. Blackwood was just the beginning. Who's in charge? Phoenix knelt beside her. Who ordered the lockout? Someone with access to classified military systems. Someone inside the Pentagon itself. She died before she could say more, leaving them with more questions than answers. 3 months later, Phoenix and Evangeline stood on a beach in Serenity Bay, California, watching the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean. They'd spent weeks in federal protection, testifying before congressional committees and helping investigators trace the roots of the conspiracy. Many arrests had been made, but Phoenix knew that the network Hawthorne had described was too vast and too well-connected to be completely eliminated. They'd won a battle, not the war. Do you ever regret it? Evangeline asked, her hand in his as they walked along the sand. Giving up your old life, going into witness protection? Never, Phoenix replied. Though I have to admit, small-town life is taking some adjustment. They'd assumed new identities and settled in Serenity Bay, where Evangeline worked as a nurse practitioner at the local clinic in Phoenix, served as an unofficial security consultant for the county sheriff. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was theirs. Dr. Chun, Evangeline said, using Phoenix's new surname. You ready for this? She was referring to the small ceremony they'd planned for later that morning. Nothing elaborate, just the two of them and a justice of the peace on the beach, where they'd found peace after months of running and fighting. Mrs. Chun, Phoenix replied, testing how her new name sounded. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. As they exchanged vows an hour later, with the ocean waves providing the only music they needed, Phoenix reflected on the journey that had brought them together. It had started with a simple act of compassion in a hospital room and had led them through conspiracy, betrayal, and violence to this moment of perfect peace. I love you, Evangeline said as they kissed for the first time as husband and wife. I love you too, Phoenix replied. Now and always. 3 weeks later, Evangeline discovered she was pregnant. As they sat on their porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose, she placed Phoenix's hand on her still flat belly. Our child is going to grow up in a world where truth matters, she said. Where people are willing to fight for what's right. Because of what we did. Because of what people like us choose to do every day. Standing up to corruption, protecting the innocent, refusing to let evil go unchallenged. Phoenix pulled her closer, marveling at how much his life had changed since that night in the hospital when a young nurse had shown him kindness when she could have walked away. What are you thinking about? Evangeline asked. I'm thinking about faith, Phoenix said. About how sometimes it takes the form of a stranger willing to help someone in need. And sometimes it takes the form of two people choosing to build something beautiful together, even after they've seen how dark the world can be. As the sun set over Serenity Bay, Phoenix and Evangeline Chun began planning their future together, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced everything else since that first night. Together.